Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know of a couple content warnings for this video, but also mainly for this book that I read. It is an adult book, which means if you're underage, you probably want to think twice about reading it. Normally, I feel like when people say it's adult, it's not a big deal, but like truly, there are some adult themes and content in here that I wish I hadn't read, and I'm an adult. Mainly the things that I'm talking about, there is some extremely graphic sexual content, which isn't a bad thing. It's just you have to be aware. There is a lot, and it is very graphic. There's also some violence, not as much violence as sex, but there is some violence. And then there is also mention of sexual assault and rape. So if any or all of that will offend you or affect you or trigger you in any way, please click away. Don't pick up this book. Save yourself. Today we're going to be talking about A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. If you know anything about me, I'm a huge Sarah J. Maas fan. I've read all of her books. I've reviewed most of her books on this channel. I have a lot of feelings. Not all of them are good. This is the first book in a new spin-off series. It follows the characters from the ACOTAR trilogy. If you have not read A Court of Thorns and Roses all the way up until the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight, would not recommend picking this up. You will be very confused. Nothing will make sense. If you have read through those, this book actually takes place after the events of A Court of Frost and Starlight, and it follows our main character, Nesta, who is Feyre's sister, and then it also follows Cassian, who is one of the Illyrian warriors. Everybody was anticipating this. We've known about it for like 2 or 3 years now. It is a big deal. We were all very excited. This review is going to be a hot mess. I'm not sure if it's going to make sense. I have a lot of things that I'm mad about. I have a lot of things that I really liked about it. It's just a toss-up. So before we get into the spoilers, if you want to know specifically more my thoughts, I will say I have never felt more perceived in my life. You know, I've read a lot of books. I've read a lot of books by Sarah J. Maas specifically, actually, that I felt seen, you know, like represented emotionally, and none of them has compared to the pain that I have felt reading this book. With all of my problems, like there are a lot of critiques that I have, and most of it comes down to the writing and the actual content of like the plot and the conflict. But like the emotional beats that we hit in this book, the character of Nesta specifically, I was expecting to be perceived, but like this was next level. Like there were moments where I just sat there staring at the page for 5 minutes thinking, oh my God, I had no idea people were like me. I had no idea people knew how I felt. I had no idea this is how I was perceived. In conclusion, I was just very called out. It was great. Like I really appreciated it because I had no idea this is actually how I was perceived, how I perceived myself. I just like cannot express to you the healing that has come from reading this book. The actual book itself is dedicated to Nestas everywhere. And so it's for people like me, people who are, I would say type 5, definitely type 8s on the Enneagram, but pretty much anybody who isolates and thinks they're a terrible person, like that's the journey for the book. And if I'd read this a couple of years ago, I think I would have been even more called out because I went through this journey already, but like watching it back in hindsight, I can't get over it. So mainly that's what I liked about it. I love Nesta's character. I loved her relationship with Cassian and how that evolved. I expected to enjoy that part of the story. I was anticipating liking that. The parts that I didn't like, I can't really go into detail without spoiling anything. The sex was not enjoyable. It was a lot. That's part of my critique. But honestly, that is not even my biggest critique of the book. Like, have your sex, I don't care. The actual writing and plot and conflict and the antagonist of the story, that is where most of my annoyance lies. There's also a specific storyline that if you know me, you will know exactly what I'm talking about, that I just felt was very unnecessary, and I hate it. So if you haven't read the book and you don't want to get spoiled, now is a great time to click out of the video. If, however, you are more interested in hearing about the hot mess of the book and you just don't want to read it, you can stick around. I have a lot of thoughts and I will explain them to you and you will understand all of my feelings with this book. So let's rant. Before we get into the ranting, I do actually want to touch on the things that I liked, because I think what's so frustrating to me about this book is that as much as I critique it and like I had so many issues with it, there were equally as many, if not more, things that I really enjoyed and felt perceived by, and just like overall thought were really, really well done. So it's really hard for me to rate it or recommend it or share my exact thoughts because they don't really make sense to me. It's just two different ideas stuck into one big book. But I did love it. Like, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really fun. Part of the draw to me for this book was Cassian and Nesta, because they have just been my favorite ship for a very long time. And I always knew that I was going to relate too much to Nesta. And so to get to see her go through this journey and find Cassian on the other side was just like so great. Like, the payoff that I felt seeing them come together, unmatched. Going into this book, I knew I was going to be called out because Nesta is just like me. She is a little bit more aggressive, and by the end, I think it proves that she is a type 8 on the Enneagram, whereas I am a type 5, but when 8s are stressed, they go to an unhealthy 5. So for the first half of the book, I just felt very called out. She spends a lot of this book very isolated, pushing people away, trying to protect them, because her whole core belief about herself is that she is a terrible person, she is selfish, that people don't deserve to be around her because she's just done some terrible things, and she keeps failing the people who she loves. But at the end of the day, she very much loves a lot of people very deeply, and they don't realize that. And so seeing that on the page and seeing a character go through that and kind of understand and learn about themselves, that like, actually you are a good person, actually people do love you, actually you do need to open up, like, it did things to me that other books have never been able to do, because I've never seen myself so accurately depicted. And it was just very odd. Like, I don't know how I'm still here, because it felt weird seeing that. And more than that, I loved getting to see Cassian's reaction to that. I think part of what made it so effective is that we spend time in Nesta's head where she hates herself and she feels all these terrible things. And then we get Cassian's perspective. And Cassian is kind of seen as this very good person. Nesta spends most of the book being like, he's good, I don't deserve him, he keeps treating me like this, but I don't deserve it. And Cassian sees Nesta and goes, I think you're good. Like, I see all these great things about you. I love you for this. Like, I love you for your darkness. And like, seeing somebody else like watch her go through that, I was like, is this what people think when they love me? And wow, I could go off for a very long time. But I love their relationship, and I love the enemies to lovers type of dynamic, but it's less about that, and it's more about one person who is kind of more emotionally vulnerable trying to get the other person to join them in vulnerability and open up and trust. It's a lot about trust. And so overall, like, that itself like made the book worth it for me, because I felt seen and I really loved exploring that dynamic between the two of them. So even if the rest of it is crap, I loved that. That was pretty much my favorite part of the whole book. I loved seeing Nesta's journey going through physically. Like, I have wanted to do that personally for a very long time. And so to see her go through that, and to know that Sarah has kind of gone through that type of journey, it was just really, really great. And I loved seeing her make friends and kind of go through the blood right by the end of it. Like, I feel a lot of things for Nesta. Nesta is definitely in my top 3 Sarah J. Maas characters of all time. And I know people hate her, but like, she's so great. I really loved the Solstice scene. I love that we got to revisit Solstice a year later and have Nesta be like, oh, last year I was a total bitch. Like, I'm gonna try this year. I'm gonna do better. I loved her relationship with the house. The fact that she made this house into something wonderful was just really, really beautiful. I don't know. I had a lot of fun. It was great. But also, let's talk about the rest of it. So I think what a lot of people will probably critique most about this book is the sex. And I want to touch on the sex because I think it's important to talk about, but I want you all to know that is not my biggest critique of this novel. If you don't know, I am on the ace spectrum. I hate sex. I think it's disgusting, especially penises. I want to put that out there. Men, gross. Don't want to deal with it. And so you may be wondering, Jenna, how did you sit through a blowjob? How did you sit through all of these fucking sex scenes? Because there's a lot of sex scenes. This is like so many sex scenes. And I just want to let you know, I was not comfortable. It was not fun. I don't want to reread it. I was pretty much scarred. But I think what's most important to understand is that, like, this is fun for some people. Like, I think ACOTAR as a series is very much Sarah's guilty pleasure series. And so a lot of the critiques I have with it, I actually am able to just like completely disregard because I know she had fun writing it. And I know most of the reason she wrote this series is probably because of the sex. And so if that's like the point of the series, like obviously there's going to be sex scenes. Obviously I knew going into it that it was going to be like this. I had heard it is a lot of sex and like, I was resigned. I understood my fate and I walked into that one knowingly, and I'm okay with that. I think a lot of people critique her for her sex scenes when like, this happens all the time in romance. Like this is adult romance. It just so happens to be in a fantasy world. And so when people are surprised about it or offended by it or upset by it, like it is like, that's what it's gonna be. You have to just accept it. And I think she had fun writing it, and that's just how it is, you know? I don't think I have it in me to critique it because I am sex positive for other people. Like if you wanna have sex, that's awesome. If you think that's fun, good for you. Have your blowjobs. I do not want one. And so I don't really like when people critique the sex in Sarah J. Maas books because I'm like, what's so wrong with that? Like, sure, it's uncomfortable, but like, just skim it. Don't read it. I'm fine. I've made it out. I will never think about it again, but I've made it out, you know? I am offended because like, it was really, really gross and I did not want all those details. And I think I was more not upset, but I was more just frustrated because I could not understand these characters. Like I can't understand wanting to have sex with someone this frequently. It's just relentless. Like literally every second of every day they like needed sex and thought about sex, and I just personally couldn't relate to it. I have no problem with it. If that's your life, live your dreams. But I was more just like trying to comprehend the whole book. Like why? How is this fun for you? Like, it just didn't click. I didn't get it. But I hate when people make a big deal out of it and critique it because, like, it's not that big of a deal. Just let people have sex. I do also actually want to touch, this isn't a critique. This is actually a positive. I was kind of glad, I guess, that one of the things Sarah touched on in this book with sex is she talked a lot about masturbation. And whatever your thoughts are on masturbation, I don't really care. But there are just not a lot of scenes of women pleasuring themselves. And so I was like, you know, I don't love this, but like, hey, we got some representation. Both of them are pleasuring themselves and they're having a great time. Good for you. That's great. I'm glad we have that in fantasy now. I don't know. So there are three main issues that I have with this book. Most of them are about characters and plot. And I think I'm going to save the best for last. So let's start with the plot. The ACOTAR series, especially the first trilogy, but also apparently the spin-off series, are not plotted well. The conflict doesn't really make a lot of sense. I feel like the stakes are not that high. The politics just don't really matter too much. And so I just was really frustrated because I felt like I could skip most of the politics sections, most of the conflict with the queens and Briallen and whatever. And like, I just genuinely don't care. With her other series, especially with Throne of Glass, I feel like it was very well plotted and planned out. And like, obviously you knew there was going to be like a 7-book arc. She had been planning it for a very long time. And so there were so many things that just lined up very well. And you can tell that she really put her time and energy into that series. This series, I think it's more proof that it's just a guilty pleasure series because ultimately, like as a fantasy novel, like the stakes and the conflict and the antagonist are just poorly written and poorly crafted. And I don't think, it's because I don't think that's the point of the series. And so I can forgive her for that, but I just was very frustrated because I genuinely skimmed and did not care about Briallen at all. When she was unmade, I was like, wow, that's really cool. But also like, what is the point? And also this new death god guy, I don't care. The second thing that made me incredibly mad and frustrated was the characters from the original series. Mainly the Inner Circle, Rhys and Feyre, and I will say probably Amren. I think those are like the main ones, and Elaine is another one, and kind of more. Mainly all of them just annoyed the crap out of me. I think some of it felt out of character, but a lot of it was just they just made me very frustrated and upset, mainly with how they treated Nesta, specifically in the beginning. They kind of came around towards the end, but like, I want to touch on this because it made me so mad. So like, I understand that not everybody likes Nesta. I totally get that she was out of line on a lot of things. She's not a perfect person. She has a lot of flaws. She did not treat people well. Totally get that. I understand her issues. However, I was very offended by how the inner circle treated her for a majority of the book, specifically the first half of the book. They have this intervention with her at the beginning, and they're basically like, okay, you've been fucking a lot of people, you've been drinking a lot, you haven't been talking to us, you've been isolating yourself, this is not healthy. We're gonna force you to start physically training, and we're moving you out of your house right now. Like, I understand where they're coming from, and I know that it was the best thing for her, and obviously it worked out, and obviously she forgave them, and like, I understand. I always understand where the author is coming from. However, as a 5, as somebody who is Nesta, I just did not think that was the best way to go about it, and I can't tell if like Sarah should have written it differently, or like if these characters should have just acted differently. But the way they went about it was so wrong. I think it hurt me a lot because in the original series, and actually in this book as well, like the whole point of the Night Court and the Inner Circle is that all of them have gone through trauma. All of them are working to kind of save themselves and work through that trauma. And they're understanding of each other, and it's a family, and like, we're here to help you and we're going to support you. And like, we saw Feyre go through this really, really rough trauma, and her family kind of came together and they supported her, and like, it was hard, but they still loved her through it, and it was really great. For this one, for Nesta, Cassian was basically the only one, maybe a little bit of Asriel, but mostly it was just Cassian helping her through this. It got to a point where all of them were so upset with her and fed up with her that they were like, no, we're banishing you. We're forcing you to do this thing that you don't really want to do. We're going to move you out of your house. We're going to take away everything you care about, and just kind of like have Cassian deal with you because I can't deal with you anymore. You're a terrible person. Nesta's core belief system about herself is that she is a terrible person, is that people don't want to be around her, is that people are excluding her, choosing to leave her, whatever. And so the fact that the Inner Circle sat down, talked about her behind her back, decided that they knew what's best for her, knew that they wanted to control her, which is also her greatest fear as an 8. The fear that she must have felt, and like the despair and the hurt that came out of that, just ridiculous. And the fact that they all acted like she was at fault for a lot of this, like, she is working through trauma just like they are, and they're just not understanding her at all. I think Cassian, even though there were a couple moments where I was like, you're not really getting her, like, for the most part, he totally understood her. And I think I have no qualms about Cassian. He dealt with it fine. He's not the problem here. Even Asriel, there were moments where I was like, I think Az also understands her. But like the rest of them, it's like they just got really fed up with her very quickly and were like, you're not talking to us and you're being a bitch. I think we should just banish you and force you to do things you don't want to do. It frustrates me. And I think part of it too is that I put myself in Nesta's shoes. And so to be in that situation, and if my friends did that to me, it would be terrible. I don't know how I would come back from that, because I would be very offended and upset, and I would feel very unloved. And so the fact that Nesta like came back from that, forgave them, worked through that is very impressive to me, because I was very offended. I think the difference is, in the first 3 books, we're in Feyre's perspective, and so we see a lot of these characters just reacting to Feyre. And in this book, you see Nesta's perspective, and they treat her very differently. And so when we see them reacting with Feyre, like, everybody's nice, Rhys loves her and dotes on her, like, they're very forgiving, they protect her at all times. Whereas with Nesta, all of a sudden everybody seemed very cliquey, and it's like when you zone out of anything, like, you get to see the effects on the outside world, and suddenly, like, my whole perception of the Inner Circle and the Night Court totally changed in this book. Not necessarily for the worse or for the better. I just was very fascinated to see how a different perspective with the same characters can totally change everything. and I didn't love it. Like, I was a little bit upset because I felt like a lot of characters felt out of character, but to understand that they're from Nesta's perspective and not Feyre's perspective is such a huge thing. That part, as much as it annoyed me, I was also like, whoa, like, do you ever really know anybody? That was like what made me the most mad. Like, I was genuinely upset for Nesta because she had to go through that. But the worst part of this whole book, literally, I cannot express to you how much I did not sign up for a pregnancy book. I did not. Like, I knew it was gonna happen, but... So what happens is we find out part of the reason why Rhys and Feyre are kind of being bitches is because Feyre is pregnant. Mainly Rhys. Rhys is the one who is just a big fucking dick in this whole book. He is very protective of Feyre, and I understand where he's coming from, but also I kind of wanted to kill him. So we find out Feyre is pregnant, and so most of the book is them trying to save her because they figure out that the baby has wings, and Feyre does not have the pelvis to give birth to a winged child. And on top of that, Rhys and Feyre have this bargain that they made with each other after ACOTAR, where they were like, oh, I don't want to leave this world without you. So if one of us dies, the other one also is going to die. And so literally, like, the whole book is Rhys hiding this potential death from Feyre. And the main like emotional climax of Nesta's character is that she yells at Feyre and tells her that like there's a chance she'll die, and the rest of her family isn't talking to her about it. And so by the end of the book, like, obviously Feyre gives birth, and like Nesta figures out a loophole with magic to kind of save her, and so Rhys becomes eternally grateful because the baby is born, and it's all because Nesta was a good person in the end. And like, objectively, like, there's nothing wrong with pregnancy. If you want to have kids, have kids. I don't really care. We knew that Feyre was going to be pregnant because if you've read, this is spoilers for Kingdom of Ash, there is a connecting scene where Aelin falls through the ACOTAR world, sees Feyre pregnant, and then like keeps going on. And that scene is referenced in this book, which I fully appreciated, and I did not hate that. Like, that was great to see Aelin like pop in real quick. But like, the whole Faysand's storyline for this book was, my wife is pregnant, she might die, and as a result, I might die, and so I'm gonna be mean to everybody because I'm just trying to protect her. What also bothered me is it's similar to Breaking Dawn. I just like don't like children, and I don't want to read about pregnancy. Pregnancy is like one of my worst fears. I never want to be pregnant because I would not handle it well, and it would not go well for me. If other people want to be pregnant, that's cool, but also like, I hate children and I don't want to interact with your kid, and I genuinely don't care about children at all. What better way to completely just like cut down Faysand to make me not care about them, to actually make me kind of hate them, than to make Feyre pregnant? A lot of this is personal preference. I think the way that she plotted out the pregnancy and like made it such a big deal, and like she has wings, and like it's a big, like, fearing for her life, all that stuff. Like, I don't necessarily love that plot of it, but I think the plot of Feyre being pregnant is not what bothered me per se. Like, it's more of a personal preference. I understand. I get it. I just wish that there hadn't been a pregnancy in this book because it was really fucking annoying. Ultimately, my biggest complaint about this book is like, one, it could have been half the size. Two, I think she focused on a lot of things when I just wanted her to focus on Nesta getting better. And so a lot of the other things, I was just like, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I skimmed a lot because I just wanted to get to the Nesta and Cassian scenes. And so overall, like, I had a good time. It was enjoyable. I don't think it was well plotted. I think it could have been written a little bit better. And obviously, I think there were a smidgen too many sex scenes, and they were a little bit too graphic. But like, I enjoyed it. It was great. It made me feel very seen and perceived. So like, I don't even know, like, I don't know how I feel about it. I just keep going back and forth, but also I can't stop thinking about it. But also I'm really mad at her. And also I don't want to read enough. Like, I have decided at this point, until somebody can convince me based on the information about the next book, like, I genuinely don't want to read the next book. I don't want to read about a baby. I don't care about Asriel or more, or Elaine for that matter. I don't know. It's just, it's so funny. Like, I just think it's hilarious. I don't know how I feel, and that's fine. And I'm valid. Is it my least favorite Sarah J. Maas book? Possibly. Is it also my favorite Sarah J. Maas book? Possibly. I don't know. Who's to say? Thank you guys for watching. I will continue to review and record my Sarah J. Maas experiences. I think we might be getting Crescent City 2 soon. I'm not sure about anything. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. If you suffered through the blowjob scene as I did, how scarred are you? Would love to know. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!